Hi, this is Mike. Once again, we're back at Advanced Photoshop, and this time around we're going to create an illustration using some compositing techniques and some special effects. And what we're going to do is we're going to swap out a sky out of a rather complex image, and then we're going to actually change the time of day in the picture and actually change the weather. It's kind of cool. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's going to be a fun ride, but we're going to start out with a practice file first. So let's open up the picture that you've downloaded from Blackboard called House. As you can see, it's just a kind of an average picture, nothing really compelling about it, but we want to convert this into a compelling image. First of all we want to do is swap out the sky. The sky is rather bland. And I think that if we had clouds in the sky, it would make this picture more interesting. But this is not an easy one to swap out. If we just had a straight horizon line, it would be very easy to select the sky and then replace it with something a little more interesting. But with this one, we've got the sky coming through the negative space between the leaves and the branches of this tree, and it would be rather challenging to select all those spaces. There's a couple of ways we could do it. We could use the color range tool, but that would require us to do quite a bit of retouching with our selection once we created the selection. I'm going to show you a technique. It's kind of an old one. It's been around in Photoshop for a long time, but it still works pretty well, and that's where we are going to use one of the image's channels to create a mask. And then that mask will be modified, and we'll use that to mask off our existing sky where we can replace it with a new one. Let's open up our Channels panel. And you see in your Channels panel that you've got an RGB composite channel at the top, which is a composite of your red, green, and blue channels, which make up the image. Those are all your three primary colors of light. And what I want to do is find which of these three channels is going to give me the highest contrast. And when I find the one that does, I will use that to create my mask. So I'm going to click on the red channel. And this shows all the red pixels that are in the image. And again, what I'm looking for is the channel that gives me the highest contrast between the trees and the house and the sky. And here we've got a moderate amount of contrast. Let's click on the green channel, and you see we've got also a little bit less contrast than we did with the red. Now let's take a look at the blue channel. The blue channel is going to give us our greatest contrast between the trees and the background. So I'm going to go with that. What I will do is make a copy of this blue channel. And I can do that just by dragging the blue channel to the New Channel button down here at the bottom of our Channels panel. And that copies it for me. What I need to do is adjust the brightness of this copied channel so that the sky area and all the little bits of sky showing between the leaves and the branches of the tree, the sky area needs to be white. Anything that is not the sky is going to be black. Now with my copied blue channel active, I'll increase that contrast by using levels. I'll choose Image, Adjustments, and Levels. Now you don't see it over here, but it's off onto the left side there. So Image, Adjustment, Levels. And this panel opens up where I can adjust my brightness and contrast. And you see, if you're familiar with the levels, which we've explored that before, you've got your shadow slider, your midtones, and your highlight slider. I'll increase the contrast by dragging the shadow slider towards the center of the histogram. And you see what it's doing is it's forcing these grays to become black. Now it doesn't do all of them, But I'm mostly concerned about what's going on up here in the trees anyway. I'm looking at those trees, and I'm dragging that until they get good and black. And I think you'll have your best results if you end up with your shadow slider right in the center of our histogram. Now, as I mentioned before, only the sky is to be white. Anything that is not the sky has to be black. And of course you can see that parts of the house are not completely black. So I'm going to go to my paintbrush tool, increase my brush size a little bit, make certain that I'm using black paint, and I'm going to paint out all these areas of the house that are gray or white. Now, as I get towards the roof line, things are going to get a little bit tricky. Here's how I'll take care of that. I'll go to my quick selection tool, and I'll select this portion of the sky like that. And then I will invert my selection. Control or Command Shift I to invert the selection so that now everything but this white part of the sky is selected. Then I can go back to my paintbrush and paint the chimney and the guttering and these roof lines here. Because just that part is selected, I won't accidentally paint over into the sky. Be sure and get this second chimney over here and any other parts of the house that might be showing. And then I can deselect. Now back in my channels panel, I'm going to load this channel as a selection. All I have to do is make certain that that channel is active and then click on this Load as Selection button. And it loads the sky, anything that's white, as a selection. Then I will reactivate my RGB composite channel. That way I can see the image in full color. Next, I'm going to feather this selection 1/2 pixel. So I'll choose Select, Modify, and Feather, and type in 0.5 pixel. And that puts a slight blur on the edge of our selection, which is going to allow us to tweak it a little bit down the road, as you will see here shortly. Okay, so now we are ready to swap out the sky. Again, we are making certain that our sky is selected. I'm going to leave it there for a while. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my clouds picture, which I have also picked up from Blackboard. This is the image that I want to put inside my house picture. So I'm going to select all. Control or Command A. And then I'll copy it. Control or Command C. And then I'll go back to my house picture. And I'll choose Edit, Paste Special, and Paste Into. Again, this is off the side of our video here, so we can't see it, but it's your second option, Paste Into. Or you can press Alternate Shift, Control, or Command V. And what that does is it pastes in the cloud selection into our sky selection. Now I'm going to go to my Move tool, and I'll move that sky up a little bit, just so we can see those clouds. It looks like it's just a little on the narrow side, so I'll use my Free Transform tool, and I'll pull out the sides of the cloud just a little bit. If we stretch it just a little bit like this, it's okay, especially since it's a landscape. So there we go. Just put our clouds in position just like that. Now let's take a close look at this. I'm zooming in, and it did a pretty decent job, except that you see that you've got this little fringe around our leaves and the branches. And that those little light pixels, those are parts of the original sky that are clinging on to the leaves, which were not masked off. So I'm going to go to my Layers panel, and I'm going to click on the Layer Mask for Layer 1. And I'll fine-tune that edge transition by choosing Image, Adjustments, and Levels. You can also press Control or Command L to do that. And remember when we feathered that selection? This is where that feathering is taking place. And so now I can take my input sliders and adjust those. I'll take the highlight slider right here, and I'm going to drag that to the right. And as I do so, you're going to see that fringe start to disappear. I'm going to drag it until we are at a value of about 165. Doesn't have to be exact, but you see at 165 it's cutting off the highlights, and so that fringe is starting to disappear. I'll take my midtone slider, and we're going to set that to 1.0 right there. Or let me drag it down a little bit further. That didn't seem to get rid of everything. Maybe if I drag that down to about 1.1, and you can tweak that a little bit more. But if I tweak it too far, you're going to start to see some of the branches disappear. So I don't want to get too carried away with it. I'm just going to drag it enough to where a lot of that fringe disappears. I think in this case I'm going to have to go a little bit further than I had anticipated, just to get rid of that fringe. And I'll kind of see how it looks in the rest of the image. And that looks pretty decent. This is not a perfect way to do sky replacement, but it's pretty good. I really don't know if there is a more exact method to do this, but this is a pretty good method. And then I'll click OK. I can double click on the hand tool to see the finished image. And you can see how the sky now comes through the leaves, and our fringe has disappeared. So here again is our finished image with the sky successfully swapped out. But let's have a little fun with it. Let's maybe change the time of day. Right now the picture looks like it's taken in late afternoon. Let's change the time of day so it looks like it's taken late in the evening. I'll start by creating an adjustment layer for our background, and that adjustment layer is going to be for curves. And what I want to do is darken the image to make it look like there's less light out. I can simply do that by taking this highlight point, and I'm going to pull that down, and that's lowering the highlights in the midtones. So now it looks like there's less light outside. It's later in the evening. Now I'll do the same thing for the clouds layer. And I'm doing these individually because this way I can control the clouds separate from the house. So let's go to our clouds layer, and by the way, let's go ahead and label that clouds, because I'm going to have several layers here, and I want to make certain that they're labeled properly. Okay, so my clouds layer is active. I need to make an adjustment layer for curves for it too, but I will hold down the alternate key or option key if you're on the Macintosh and click on the adjustment layer button, and again I'll choose curves. And because I held down the alternate key, I have the option of clipping it to that layer. I'll click OK. And again I'll just do the same thing. I'll take this highlight point and I'll pull that down, to what looks good. I wanted to make it, like I say, look like it's late evening, like this. I can come back any time and fine tune that. Now it's late in the evening, so let's turn on the lights. I'm going to create a new layer, which I will call outside lights. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And if you look over here, right near this red flag, you see that there is an outdoor light there. Since it's dark outside, let's turn on the lights. I'm going to go to my foreground color, and I'm going to change that to a warm yellow. I'm dragging the hue slider till we get down into kind of the yellow-orange range, and I'm going to choose a very pale, just kind of off-white color, just slightly yellowish, just slightly. We don't want to make it too obvious. And then I'm going to go to my gradient tool. From my gradient picker, I'm going to choose foreground to transparent. I'll choose the radial gradient, and I'll set my opacity about 20% or so. And I'm going to move my cursor right over the center of this light, and I'm going to click and drag out like this. And it adds a little gradient. Now I'd only set that at 20% because I'd like to have a little more control over how I paint this. I'll go back to the center of that light again, click and drag out. This time I won't drag quite as far. And I can just go back in and add multiple layers of paint until I get what looks like light coming out of there. Now the center of the light should be like really bright. That's where our light bulb is. So I'll go ahead and set my brush opacity to 100%, and I can do that just by pressing 0 on the keyboard. Move my cursor back to the center and click and drag out just a little ways like that. And there's the light bulb that's inside our light. When we go back out, it looks like we've got a light that's turned on. Now it's kind of dark over here by the garage. I'm going to put a light over there too. Now in this case there isn't a light there, so I'll just make one. I'll drop my brush opacity back down to 20%, and again just press 2 on your keyboard to do that. I'll move my cursor just above and between the two garage doors, and we're going to click and drag out like this, and then again, and then again, about like that. And then I will set my opacity back to 100% and just click and drag out a short ways, and now it looks like there's a light. Actually, it's a little strong. I'm going to undo that and just pull it out a little ways like that. So there we go. We've got what looks to be a light. There we go. It looks a little bit better like that. So there we have our two lights on. And I can go into my layers panel and I can turn those on or turn them off because they're on a separate layer. Now let's turn on the lights inside the house. I'm going to create another new layer. Alternate click on the new layer button. I'll call this one inside lights. And I'm going to zoom in to this bay window. I'll go to my polygonal lasso tool. And I'm going to lasso in this front window. I'll zoom in just a little bit more so you can see a little bit better. And then I'm going to lasso in the second window over here. I'll hold down the Shift key to add to my current selection. And then I'll click At that point I can let go of the Shift key, and we're going to lasso in this one as well. We'll ignore that bush for right now and just go right behind it and close up our selection. Next, I'm going to click my Refine Edge button on the Options bar. And here I'm going to adjust the feathering. Here's my, now the way I'm looking at this too, I've got the view set to black and white because that's going to give me, I think, a more accurate display of my selection. And I'll take this feather slider and I'm going to drag that back and forth a little bit. And I think that if we set our feathering to about 1 pixel, it'll look pretty good. And I'll click OK. So we've feathered our selection 1 pixel. And then I'm going to fill that with my foreground color. You remember your foreground color is still that warm yellowish white. So I'll press Shift and Backspace or Delete, and I'm going to fill it with foreground color. I can deselect. Now it looks like there's been somebody experimenting with nuclear fusion here. So what I'm going to do is go to my blending mode, and I'm going to change that from normal to soft light. And now it looks like there's lights on in the house. I could also choose overlay. Going to give me a slightly different effect. Not quite as intense. And that's up to you as to which one you want to choose. I'll zoom back out, and I can toggle that on or off, and you can see how the light turns on or off. And if it's too bright, you can just lower your layer opacity as well. So there we've got lights on inside and lights on outside. Next, let's change the weather. Let's make it rain. I'll create a new layer, which I will call Rain. And I'm going to fill this layer with black. Shift and Backspace or Shift and Delete, and we'll choose Fill with Black and OK. I'm going to press D on my keyboard so that my colors are back to black and white. And I'll choose Filter, Noise, and Add Noise. And in the Options panel that opens up, I'm going to adjust the slider amount to where it's about 150%. Doesn't have to be exact, and down the road, after you get a hang of this technique, you can come back and experiment with it later. And we're going to set the distribution to Gaussian and the option to monochromatic. And click OK. So it's filled with all these little white dots on a black field. I'm going to add another filter to it. I'll choose Filter, Motion Blur, actually Filter, Blur, and then Motion Blur. And in the panel that opens up, you've got this little handle here, and you can change the direction of the blur. I'll change it to where it's not quite vertical. In my case here, I'm setting the angle at 78 degrees. And I can adjust this slider, distance slider, to get different lengths. And what I'm trying to do is make this look like rain. And you can see where we're going with this. And you can experiment with this however you wish. But I'm going to set mine at about 50 pixels. I think that will work for now. And choose OK. Now you notice on the top and the bottom, let me hide this for a second. The top and bottom of a picture, the blur didn't work very well. So all I have to do is use my free transform tool, and holding down the alternate or option key, I'll click and drag the top handle and just stretch it out so that those blurred parts go completely off of our visible area there. Then I'm going to change that layer's blending mode from normal to screen. Now right now our image is black and white. When I change it to screen, well, screen ignores black pixels, so we don't see them. All we see are the blurred white pixels. And you can see it's beginning to look kind of rainy. But it looks kind of foggy too, so I'm going to adjust my contrast to clear that up. I'll create an adjustment layer for levels. I'll hold down the Alternate or Option key and click on my adjustment layer button, and I'll choose levels. And I'm going to clip it to that rain layer. And then in the Properties panel, I will take my shadow slider and I'm going to drag that towards the center. And what that's doing is it's cutting off the lower values. And now you can see how you can control the amount of the rain. I'll take the highlight slider and do the same thing. I can pull this in. The rain looks pretty coarse this way. I don't really care for that. Maybe I'll just pull it out about like this. But I think you're going to get your best results if you keep the shadow slider underneath the central part of the histogram. And then I can go back in and fine-tune my image. For example, I may want to make it a little bit darker in the background so that that rain looks a little more prominent. So I can go back into my curves, darken those up a little bit. Don't want to make it so black that you can't see anything. And a lot of this is subjective, just depends on how you want it to look. I'll go back into the curves layer for the background layer and see what happens if I darken that up a little bit. And there's my finished rain illustration. And because I've got these adjustment layers, I can come back and adjust them as I see fit. That looks pretty good. Now for your assignment, what I want you to do is something similar to this, but take it further. We'll make an illustration that you should be able to add to your professional portfolio. You'll use a picture, preferably one that you've taken yourself, but doesn't have to be. But if you borrow one from the internet or wherever, make certain that it is an image that has not been previously edited in Photoshop, one that's clean. And let's use a fairly high resolution image. We don't need anything huge, like if you take a picture with your digital camera, if you go to your image setting, image size, you might see that it's 72 pixels, but it might be 20 by 30 inches or something like that. So you'll need to drop your size down to something that's manageable. But probably something that's going to be about 8 by 10 inches. 72 pixels per inch is fine, but if you go higher than that, you're going to have huge file size, which would be difficult to submit on Blackboard. But we'll start out with a picture of your own, and then you will swap out the sky, much like we did here, and you'll create rain like you did here, and you'll even have lights that you can turn on just as we did here. But I don't want you just to mimic what we've done with this practice file. I want you to go in and make it a more compelling image. For example, you can add elements to it to make it more appealing to an audience. If there's anything wrong with the picture, then you will have to take full responsibility for that. In other words, if the perspective is off, you'll have to straighten up the perspective. If there are distracting objects in it, you'll need to remove those. You can add objects to it. Oftentimes, a picture will be greatly enhanced if you put human beings in it. So placing people in an image is going to make it much more compelling. But we don't want just a picture of a house or a building in the rain. That's not very exciting. Okay, so we've got to do something that's going to make people want to look at this picture. And this is your opportunity to be an artist or an illustrator. I'll show you a couple of examples of what I mean. This is student work from a while back, and here's a picture that one of my students started with. And here's the finished illustration. You can see the sky has been changed out. The atmosphere has been changed. There's a lot of fog as well as the rain. There's been lights added that are casting beams out from the doorway there. The colors have been muted, and it creates a really nice illustration. So you see, it's not just a picture of a house in the rain. It's much more than that. Here's another example. Here's the before picture, and here's after. You can see that there's been a blue cast applied to the whole picture. We have some soft yellow lighting coming from the porch here. Moon and clouds have been added, and of course the rain, but it gives us a whole different feeling than what we saw with the original picture. And then my favorite is this one here. This is a self-portrait of the artist. He photographed himself in his living room with his digital camera. He put on a raincoat and did a little bit of simple acting, photographed himself. Then he went downtown and photographed one of the churches and swapped out the sky, added lights in the background, and created rain. And so here he created his own very personal illustration with pictures that he did all himself. This is fabulous. So spend a good deal of time on this. Again, this is your opportunity to create professional looking artwork that would go into your personal portfolio, something that you could show prospective clients or employers to show what you can do in Photoshop. Submit both this and the practice file to me on Blackboard. But again, make certain that you do something that's really innovative, that really want to make someone take notice of it, something different. Okay? Thanks, and I'll look forward to talking with you soon. This is Mike McCrease.